Okay, Year 7, here is our next exercise, and we are going to find the area of a triangle. Now remember when this all started, and we were trying to find the area of shapes, and we said that the area of a plane shape is the space contained inside, and we measure that area in squares. We couldn't do circles because you get gaps. We could have done triangles, but squares are the way in which we measure area. So for a rectangle, because it has a right angle and it's straight up, we can quickly make it into rows and columns and just go one side times the other. And remember, there are 3 formulas or 4 formulas, lots of formulas you can use. The textbook does area equals length times breadth. Some other textbooks do length times width, but I think it's easier to use base times height. And that's only because we can then use the same formula for a parallelogram. So there's our questions on rectangles. And here's the work we did on parallelograms. Because we cut that bit off, move it over, and every parallelogram can be made into a rectangle. Now, we just then have to use base times height. And you might be thinking why we skipped 10g. Well, here's the reason. Because the way they describe it, their explanation for this, is they go, well, every triangle can be made into a rectangle, which is true. You can make every triangle into a rectangle. But for some of them, it's harder than others. This one is rather easy. That one, a little bit more difficult. And it's hard to determine, well, is that exactly half? And this one, even harder. There's an easier way. So if you have a triangle, and this one's just going to give me an equilateral triangle. So I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to use this one here because it's already drawn. Every triangle can be made into a parallelogram. So if I copy this triangle and flip it and paste it, I get a rectangle, but a rectangle is a parallelogram. If I copy this triangle and then flip it and paste it, so if I flip it over here, I get a parallelogram. And if I copy this triangle and copy and paste it, so imagine this, I'm going to redraw it over here, and I copy it and paste it up here, I get a parallelogram. This is a parallelogram. And because I've copied it and pasted it, flipped it and pasted it, I know that the triangle is exactly half of any parallelogram because I'm just copy, pasting and flipping, or copying, flipping and pasting. So the area of a triangle is a half base times height because every triangle can be reflected to be a parallelogram. So a triangle is half a parallelogram, and that's what we're going to use. Area equals a half BH. Once you know that, you just need the perpendicular height. So what questions do we have to do? 1 and 2 and 3, just verbally or in your head, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's have a look. Okay. So you just need to go through and identify where the base and what the height is. And remember, the height must always have a little square to indicate it's perpendicular. So here, the base is 20, the height is 8. That's pretty easy. What about if they draw it upside down? Doesn't matter. Here, the base is 7 and the height is 2.1. Here, in C, the base is 2 and the height, always look for that little right angle, is 3. See if you can do D before I do it. Well, there's your base and there's your height. Doesn't matter if it's upside down or turned, rotated to the side. So here, there's your base, there's your height. There's your base, there's your height. Make sure you can do them. Here, there's your base, there's your height. Now, they've made a bit of a mistake. They really should have a little sign in there, the same as they should have a little sign in there. Always look for that little right angle. So there's your base, there's your height. Okay, so here we go, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These are so easy. You're going to need your calculator. I'm not going to do them all. It helps if you write the formula. So here's 4a. Area equals a half the base times the height. Now, if I can identify the base and the height, I'm away. So it's a half. Well, that one's pretty easy. 4a, my base is 8, and my height is 4. I go to my calculator, and I go, and I get 16. And remember, it's area, and I'm using meters square, or square meters. I'm going to leave you to do B and C. I'm going to jump in at D, because I'm not going to do all of these. You have a go at them. Area is a half the base times the height. By the way, to do B, there's your base, there's your height. There's your base, there's your height. In D, there's my base, there's my height. So it's a half times 1 times 2.4. I'm going to use my calculator, and I'm just going to go, whoops, a half times 1 times 2.4, 1.2. And what units are we in? Meter squares. I will do E. It's the first one that we've seen that has a height outside, but that doesn't affect us. A half base times height, which is a half times 3 times 2. I don't need my calculator for that, because 3 times 2 is 6, and a half of 6 is 3. And we've got millimetre squares. I'm going to jump down now to H and I. You can have a go at the others. In H, area is a half base times height. Oh, they've drawn it upside down. Don't let that worry you. There's your base, there's your height. So it's a half times 10 times 4. Go to my calculator. Half of 10 times 4, 20. What units are we in? Meter squares. And to finish off, I'll do I. Area is a half the base times the height. Well, here's the base and here's the height. Don't worry that it's been drawn on an angle. Remember, you can turn or rotate your book or rotate the image. So it's a half times 5 times 1.7. Calculator again. Half times 5 times 1.7, 4.25. What units are we in? Meters squared. So that's really all there is to it. And let's have a look at 5. What are they going to give us in 5? Now they've drawn them on the grid, so you've got to be able to find the height. So you've got to count the squares. So here, the base is 2 units across, and the height is 2. So that is a half of 2 times 2. Here's your base, and it's 3 across, and the height, well, the height is the distance all the way to the top, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4, a half of 3 times 4. Here, they've drawn this triangle a little askew, but that's okay. There's your base, and your height is that distance there, or that distance there, which is 3. So a half of 2 times 3. And finally, this one here, well, that's the base, 3 across, and the height is 2 up. So it's a half of 3 times 2. 6. So we have a rectangular block of land, right? A rectangular block of land. So let's draw ourselves a rectangle. You have a go at this yourself. There's my rectangle. And they say 40 metres long, 20 metres wide. So it's 40 by 20. And it's cut in half along the, find the area of each triangular block. So find the area of this bit here. Well, it's a half the rectangle, which is a parallelogram. So area is a half, a half times base times height, which is a half. Well, the base is 40 and the height is 20, which will be 400, but I'll use my calculator. And I get 400. And it's in metres, so 400 metre squares. This one, 7, you have a go at it, but it's a pyramid, and it says find the area of the face of the pyramid. So all this area in here, well, you've got a base of 120 and a height of 80. So for question 7, you have a go at it. Stop the video and then come back. Well, if you've come back and you're checking now, area is a half the base times the height. The base is 120 and the height is 80. I'm going to use my calculator for that one. (4,800 square metres or metre squares). And finally, the last question. Each face of a 4-sided die is triangular with a base of 2 centimetres of height. Find the total area of the 4-sided die. So if you've ever seen a die, it's going to be let's get a better image. Now you can see them. All right, 4-sided die. So now I'm going to draw one. And I've got 4 triangle faces, and they tell me that the base is 2 and the height of each face is 1.7. So the area of 1 is a half times the base times the height, but I have 4 sides, so I'm going to times it by 4. So it's a half. And the base is 2, the height is 1.7, and I've got 4 faces. So go to my calculator, and I go a half times 2 times 1.7, and I've got 4 faces. It's 6.8. What units was it in? Centimetres squared. Now that should be enough for triangles. Hopefully you did some of those on your own and you were able to calculate them and you're able to finish the work. Well done.